He built an empire from sugar and flour, but what nearly destroyed him had nothing to do with cake. At the height of his fame, Buddy Valastro was almost untouchable. He was a TV star, a master baker, and a beloved family man. But behind the sweet success was a storm no one saw coming. There was a devastating freak accident, a public fall from grace, and silent battles that nearly broke him. But what exactly happened to the cake boss? What happened when the cameras stopped rolling? What's he up to right now? And has he managed to fight his way back? His story has a heartbreaking twist to it. The bumpy road to stardom. You've seen his cakes, you've seen his show, but what you haven't seen is the part of Buddy Valastro's story that nearly erased everything he built. But before the fame, the cameras, and the towering jaw-dropping cakes that turned him into a global sensation, Buddy Valastro was just a kid who fell in love with a craft that would later define his life. Bartolo Valastro Jr., also known as Buddy, was born on March 3, 1977. He came into the world as the only son of Bartolo Sr. and Mary Valastro, a pair of hard-working Italian immigrants. The Valastros weren't rich, but what they had was something that money couldn't buy. And that was a strong, tight-knit family and an even stronger work ethic. Buddy was the youngest of 5 children, raised in a home filled with tradition, food, and the kind of unity that Italian-American families are known for. His 4 older sisters, Grace, Mary, Madalena, and Lisa, were his early circle, and their household always revolved around family, food, and faith. At the center of their world was a small bakery named Carlo's, which had been purchased by Bartolo Buddy's father in 1964. But the bakery had become more than just a business. It was an extension of the family. Located in the heart of Hoboken, Carlo's Bakery served up cannolis, Italian cookies, and custom cakes to generations of locals. For Buddy, it was never just a place his dad worked. It was where he spent countless childhood afternoons watching, learning, and eventually stepping behind the counter himself. Buddy officially started working at Carlo's Bakery when he was just 11 years old. While other kids were out playing stickball or riding bikes, he was in the bakery after school, learning to roll dough, ice cupcakes, and master the simplest, most essential techniques of baking. And early on, Buddy understood that baking wasn't just about taste, it was about precision, creativity, and pride. Then came 1994, a year that would permanently alter the course of his life. Buddy was only 17 when tragedy struck. His father, his mentor, his teacher, and the man who had been at the center of the bakery was diagnosed with lung cancer. The illness progressed quickly, and within a short time, the family had to say goodbye. For Buddy, the loss wasn't just personal, it was professional. He lost both his father and the man who had been preparing him to take over someday. Only now, someday, had arrived much sooner than anyone expected. At just 17, Buddy found himself in charge of Carlo's Bakery. He had no college education, no formal culinary training, and no experience running a business. But what he did have was a promise he had made to his father before he died, to transform Carlo's Bakery into a household name. That promise wasn't just a son comforting his father. It became the mission that would drive everything Buddy did moving forward. Those early years were anything but easy. Buddy worked long hours, sometimes through the night, just to keep the bakery afloat. He learned how to manage employees, meet customer expectations, and design cakes that pushed creative boundaries. What helped him survive was the foundation his father had left behind. His father's lessons were still fresh in his mind, and Buddy followed them religiously. Slowly, word began to spread. His cakes started to appear in local bridal magazines, particularly those that highlighted custom and luxury weddings. Brides began seeking out Carlo's Bakery for wedding cakes that told a story and were memorable. Buddy's style stood out. He made use of bold designs, clean finishes, and the ability to translate any idea, from a bouquet of flowers to a race car, into edible form. This visibility in wedding publications turned out to be a critical turning point. In 2007, Buddy was invited to appear on Food Network Challenge, a competitive baking show that tested cake artists on national television. It was his first time stepping into the spotlight, but he brought with him the same intensity and focus he had learned growing up in the bakery. The audience was captivated, not just by the cake he created, but by his energy, precision, and charm. That single appearance was the spark, and television producers took notice. They saw more than just a baker. They saw the story of a young man running a family bakery, surrounded by passionate relatives, turning flour and fondant into something extraordinary. The high-pressure environment, the family drama, and the artistic talent made perfect sense for reality TV. And so, conversations began behind the scenes. A concept started to form. And soon enough, cameras would begin rolling. And just like that, Buddy Valastro's world was about to get a whole lot bigger. The rise of Cake Boss. By the late 2000s, Buddy Valastro had already carved out a name for himself in New Jersey. But what happened next would catapult him and his family's bakery into a completely different league. In 2009, after his eye-catching appearance on Food Network Challenge, Buddy was approached by television producers who saw something more than just incredible cakes. They saw a story, a lovable real-life family business, and a cast of real people with authentic chemistry that would become a reality TV goldmine. And so, in 2009, Cake Boss premiered on TLC, and from the very first episode, viewers were hooked. The show introduced audiences to the heart and soul of Carlo's bakery, not just Buddy himself, but his entire family. There was the no-nonsense older sister Grace, the meticulous Madalena, the outspoken Mary, the ever-smiling Lisa, and of course the loyal in-laws, Mauro Castano, a master cake sculptor, and Joey Fogno, the head baker and husband to Grace. The show was fast-paced, and it felt real. Every cake came with a deadline, a backstory, and the chaos of a bakery that never stopped moving. What separated Cake Boss from other cooking or baking shows wasn't just the impressive cakes, it was the people behind them. Audiences saw the traditions passed down from Buddy's father. They watched family arguments explode over fondant mistakes and cake deliveries gone wrong. They saw siblings fight, laugh, cry, and support each other in the high-pressure world of custom baking, and the world took notice. The show quickly became a hit, not just in the United States, but globally. Cake Boss was eventually broadcast in over 200 countries and dubbed or subtitled into multiple languages. Just like that, Buddy Valastro became a familiar face on multiple continents, and Carlo's Bakery became an internationally recognized brand. For many viewers, especially in immigrant households, the Valastro family dynamic was something they could relate to, especially when it came to tradition, hustle, generational pride, and the constant balancing act between love and business. Back home in Hoboken, things changed fast. Carlo's Bakery transformed from a beloved local shop into a full-fledged tourist destination. Fans began lining up outside the original storefront for hours just to catch a glimpse of the bakery they'd seen on TV. The once quiet block now buzzed with excitement every single day. Tour buses dropped off fans, street vendors sold Carlo's merchandise, and inside the bakery, the staff worked double time just to keep up with the demand. But Buddy wasn't content with just one booming location. With the show's success came opportunity, and he seized it. He expanded Carlo's Bakery into a national and later international brand. Over the next decade, he opened more than 18 bakery locations across the United States, and even as far as São Paulo, Brazil. Each location carried the same style, flavors, and personal touches that defined the original. But it didn't stop at bakeries. In 2013, Buddy launched Buddy V's Ristorante in Las Vegas, a full-service Italian restaurant that honored his mother's cooking and the flavors he grew up with. The menu featured family recipes, hearty portions, and that unmistakable Valastro charm. He later opened Pizza Cake, a fast-casual concept in Nevada, offering over-the-top pizza and desserts in a grab-and-go style. These ventures allowed Buddy to diversify while still keeping his brand rooted in the world of food. He also moved into retail. Recognizing the passion his fans had for baking, Buddy launched a line of consumer products. His name began appearing on baking tools, DIY cake kits, and specialty ingredients. Home bakers could now buy Valastro-branded turntables, piping bags, and cake mixes at retailers like Walmart and Target. He even released several cookbooks that combined family stories with his most beloved recipes. In terms of television, the Cake Boss universe kept expanding. TLC saw the potential and developed several spin-offs starring Buddy, including Next Great Baker, a competitive reality series where aspiring bakers fought for a job at Carlo's Bakery. There was Kitchen Boss, a cooking show where Buddy shared family meals and personal recipes. There was also Buddy's Bakery Rescue, where he visited struggling bakeries to help turn them around. And there was Buddy vs. Duff, a high-stakes competition between Buddy and fellow cake artist Duff Goldman, which brought out a more competitive, showman-like side of Buddy's personality. And each show carried the same themes that made Cake Boss successful. Despite the global fame and business growth, Buddy made a conscious decision to keep the business family-centered. His siblings all played active roles, and at home, his wife, Lisa Valastro, played a quiet but powerful role behind the scenes. As Buddy's fame grew, she helped maintain the stability of their home life and began appearing more frequently in later seasons. Their children also began to make occasional appearances, and as they grew older, Buddy introduced them to the kitchen, continuing the same hands-on mentoring style his father once used with him. But just when it seemed like Buddy had everything under control, from his success to family and legacy, a freak accident would bring it all to a sudden halt, and what happened in the quiet of his own home would leave fans stunned and fearing the worst. The accident that changed everything. In the world of professional baking, your hands are everything. For Buddy Valastro, they weren't just tools, they were the very foundation of his identity. Every delicate sugar flower, every perfectly piped border, and every sculpted masterpiece he'd ever made had come from those hands. So when tragedy struck in 2020, it didn't just threaten his career, it shook him to his core. And it happened in a place most people would never expect, his own home. In September 2020, just months after the world had gone into lockdown, Buddy was spending time with his family at their home in Montville, New Jersey. With businesses temporarily closed and production slowed due to the pandemic, like many others, Buddy was staying close to home. The Valastro family had a private bowling alley in their house, an amenity meant for fun and bonding. However, that day, something went terribly wrong. A mechanical malfunction occurred with the pin setter, the machine that resets bowling pins after each roll. It jammed, and in an attempt to fix the issue himself, Buddy tried to release the jam manually. It was something he'd done before, and an ordinary task in an otherwise normal moment. But this time was different, because while reaching into the mechanism, a 1.5-inch metal rod suddenly and forcefully impaled his dominant right hand, trapping it inside the machine. His teenage sons, Buddy Jr. and Marco, were home at the time and immediately rushed to his aid. It took them over 5 minutes, along with a reciprocating saw, to carefully cut through the metal and free their father's hand. By the time they got him out, the damage was done. Bones were crushed, nerves were damaged, and his hand was mangled. He was rushed to the hospital and immediately underwent emergency surgery. But that wouldn't be the end of it. Over the following months, Buddy would go through a total of 5 surgeries to reconstruct his hand. Surgeons had to insert rods, repair tendons, and carefully rebuild what had been broken. But the physical pain was only part of the story. For someone whose entire life depended on dexterity, control, and precision, the psychological impact was devastating. Buddy later revealed in an interview that one terrifying thought kept repeating in his mind: "Without my hands in the decorating world, I'm nothing." This wasn't just a medical injury, it was an identity crisis. For decades, Buddy had been the cake boss, the man who could turn cake into anything and anything into cake. And now, he couldn't even grip a spoon properly. The rehab process was long and grueling. Physical therapy became part of his daily routine. He had to relearn movements that had once come effortlessly, like squeezing a piping bag or holding a spatula. But through it all, Buddy pushed forward. With support from his family and medical team, he slowly began regaining function. There were setbacks. There were days when he questioned if he'd ever be able to return to the kitchen in full force. But he kept showing up. His wife, Lisa, stood by his side, and his kids offered both encouragement and perspective. This was a man who had built his career on perseverance, and now he was fighting to reclaim it. The accident also forced Buddy to reflect, not just on his physical limits, but on life itself. He later spoke about how the experience made him think deeply about mortality, legacy, and the fragility of the things we often take for granted. For the first time, he was faced with the real possibility that his hands might never work the same again. And with that came a wave of uncertainty about everything he'd built, from the bakery to the shows, the brand, and the family dream. But there was also a sense of clarity. He began to focus more on gratitude, on being alive, on being surrounded by people who cared enough to saw through a bowling machine to save him. And eventually, that mindset began to fuel his recovery. As of late 2021, Buddy announced that he had achieved about 95% recovery in his dominant hand. While some fine motor skills remained a work in progress, he was back in the kitchen, decorating cakes, managing his team, and doing what he loved most. And to many fans, that comeback meant everything. It wasn't just about Buddy making cakes again, it was about seeing someone who had built a life through passion and hard work come face to face with disaster and still choose to fight. But the accident also marked a turning point. In the months and years that followed, Buddy became more selective about his work, more intentional about his time, and more aware of the weight of public life. Because even as he recovered from his most personal crisis, a new set of challenges that couldn't be fixed with surgery or stitches began to surface. Personal battles and public controversies. Behind the cakes, the cameras, and the charisma, Buddy Valastro's journey has also included a fair share of public scrutiny and personal struggles. As the spotlight grew brighter, so did the pressure, and over the years, Buddy has had to face not only physical obstacles, but also emotional challenges, controversies, and losses that deeply reshaped both his public image and personal identity. One of the more private battles that Buddy later opened up about was his experience with panic attacks and mental health issues. Long before his accident, and even before his global fame peaked, Buddy struggled silently under the weight of responsibility. Running a high-volume bakery, leading a growing business empire, starring in multiple TV shows, and raising a young family was a recipe for burnout. He admitted in interviews that his early days were overwhelming, and over time, that pressure manifested physically. Buddy experienced his first panic attack at the age of 27, and it was so severe that he had to be checked into the emergency ward. For a man who prided himself on leadership and strength, these episodes felt like failure. he eventually sought help and started speaking out about the importance of mental wellness. And that openness helped fans connect with him on a more human level, but it was only the beginning of a more complicated public journey. In 2014, Buddy's public image took a major hit when he was arrested for driving while intoxicated in New York City. In the early morning hours of November 13th, police officers pulled him over on 10th Avenue after noticing his car swerving between lanes. According to the police report, Buddy's breath smelled of alcohol, and he failed a field sobriety test. He was immediately arrested on the spot, and his driver's license was temporarily suspended. News of the arrest quickly made headlines, and for a figure so closely associated with family values and wholesome television, the incident felt deeply controversial to many fans. But what made the situation more concerning was the fact that while being arrested, Buddy reportedly told the cops, "I had a couple of drinks. You can't arrest me. I'm the cake boss." Buddy was quick to address the issue. Just days later, he issued a formal apology saying, "I want to thank everyone for their support. I also want to apologize to everyone. I'm very disappointed in myself. My sincerest apologies to my family, friends, and fans." Though the incident didn't lead to jail time, the fallout was significant. TLC distanced itself from the event, and critics began questioning whether fame had changed the once grounded baker. For Buddy, the arrest became a personal wake-up call. He later admitted it was a turning point that made him re-evaluate his habits, his choices, and the example he wanted to set for his children. But even before that, in 2012, Buddy had found himself at the center of a different kind of controversy, one tied to issues of the queer community representation and respect. During an episode of Cake Boss, producers orchestrated a prank involving Carmen Carrera, a well-known transgender model and reality TV star. The premise involved one of Buddy's cousins being tricked into flirting with Carrera, only to later be told that she was transgender. The episode sparked immediate backlash from both fans and advocacy groups, who criticized the segment for being transphobic and demeaning. Carmen Carrera herself took to social media, expressing her disappointment and hurt. She revealed that she had been lured by producers to appear on the show under false pretenses, and had been reduced to a mere punchline on the show. That particular episode was so controversial that it was pulled from the air, and Buddy responded with a public apology. The incident was a learning moment, both for Buddy and for reality television in general. It forced producers and public figures alike to reckon with the responsibility that comes with having a platform. And for Buddy, it marked a shift toward more mindful, inclusive engagement with his audience. Another high-profile storyline that followed him for years was his feud with Duff Goldman, star of Ace of Cakes. For a long time, fans and media framed the two as baking rivals, and though they didn't often engage publicly, the tension was palpable. In 2019, the two were brought together for a televised baking showdown on Buddy vs. Duff, and what began as a rivalry slowly transformed into mutual respect. The competition was fierce, but it revealed something deeper. Both men were incredibly talented, driven, and passionate about their craft. After intense rounds of sculpted cake battles, the two shared a handshake and acknowledged each other's skill. In an interview following the finale, Buddy called Duff the real deal, acknowledging that although they had different styles, Duff was a talented artist. Duff responded similarly, saying he learned a lot just watching Buddy work. What could have remained a rivalry matured into a recognition of shared passion, and it was a moment fans of both camps appreciated. But perhaps the most heartbreaking chapter in Buddy's public life came in 2017, when he announced the death of his mother, Mary Valastro. Known to fans as Mama Mary, she had been a central figure on Cake Boss, known for her gentle presence, sharp wit, and old-school Italian wisdom. Mary had been battling ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, for several years, and her condition had progressively worsened. Her loss was devastating because Buddy often credited his mother as the heart of the family. Her passing left a visible void in both the show and his life. In the seasons that followed, fans noted a more subdued tone, with Buddy often reflecting more deeply on legacy, family, and the fragility of time. Losing his mother, just as he had once lost his father, added a layer of gravity to everything he did. He didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to honor the people who had helped him get there. But through all these challenges, mistakes, missteps, grief, and growth, Buddy Valastro showed something beyond cake skills. He showed the ability to learn, to reflect, and to keep moving forward. And so, after the fame, the accidents, the apologies, and the losses, Buddy Valastro still wasn't done. Because what came next was a new chapter entirely marked by resilience and reinvention. The return of the cake boss. After years of soaring success, personal challenges, painful loss, and a near career-ending injury, many wondered whether Buddy Valastro would ever truly return to the spotlight. But the truth is, he never really left. He simply evolved. In 2023, Buddy made it official. He wasn't just coming back to TV, he was launching a new era called Buddy Valastro's Cake Dynasty, a fresh series that marked the cake boss's formal return to the screen, but with a twist. This time, the focus wasn't just on massive cakes or family chaos, it was on legacy. The show presents a more mature Buddy. He's still the charismatic, fast-talking baker fans remember, but now with a clear mission to pass the torch. In Cake Dynasty, viewers get a deeper look at how Buddy is building the future of Carlo's Bakery, this time with his children front and center. His eldest daughter, Sophia, along with sons Buddy Jr., Marco, and Carlo, has stepped up to play bigger roles, learning the business from the ground up, just like he once did with his own father. In interviews promoting the show, Buddy shared how meaningful it's been to work side by side with his kids. To him, this was about building something they could be proud of and eventually take over. At the same time, the bakery itself has undergone major changes. The original Carlo's Bakery in Hoboken remains a cultural landmark, but the business model has shifted. In recent years, multiple physical locations of Carlo's Bakery have quietly closed, particularly in secondary markets where foot traffic dropped post-pandemic. Rather than framing it as a retreat, Buddy positioned it as a strategic pivot, moving away from the old brick-and-mortar approach to embrace a digital-first nationwide delivery model. Today, Carlo's Bakery operates a thriving online store that ships cakes, pastries, and even DIY cake kits directly to customers' doors across the United States. It's efficient, scalable, and aligned with modern consumer behavior. This digital transformation hasn't meant stepping away from physical spaces entirely, though. In 2024, Carlo's Bakery made headlines once again with the opening of a flagship location in New York City's Times Square, arguably one of the most iconic and high-traffic spots in the world. It was a bold move and a deeply symbolic one. After the accident, the setbacks, and the evolving industry, Buddy chose Times Square as the place to replant his flag. It's a return to form, but with a modern twist. The new bakery doesn't just serve cannolis and rainbow cookies. It also features self-serve cake vending machines, a social media-ready photo area, and a slick, streamlined design meant to blend old-school charm with 21st century flair. Of course, even as the business has found its rhythm again, Buddy himself is still healing, both physically and emotionally. Though he's regained about 95% functionality in his dominant hand, he's been honest about the lingering limitations. Some movements don't come as easily, and some decorating tasks now require assistance. He now spends more time developing new product ideas, training staff, overseeing branding and nurturing his children's interest in the family trade. It's a slower pace than the chaos of the early Cake Boss days, but it's one that Buddy has grown to appreciate. After surviving a brutal accident, enduring public mistakes, and weathering unimaginable personal loss, he's emerged with a clearer sense of what matters. Fame is fleeting. Trends come and go. But family, tradition, and resilience? Those are lasting. In Cake Dynasty, you see that perspective in real time. You see Buddy teaching his daughter how to balance work and life. You see him letting go of the piping bag so someone else can try. You see the hustle, but you also see the humility that comes from someone who knows just how quickly life can shift. Today, Buddy Valastro is no longer just the face of a bakery or the star of a reality show. He's the architect of a dynasty, one built not just on cake, but on grit, growth, and generations. Would you like to see more of Buddy Valastro on television? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.